And welcome back to the Recovered Life Show, joined today by Recovered Life contributor Shauna McKenna Vick. How you doing, Shauna?
Honestly, Damon, I've had a rough couple of weeks. I'm glad to be here today. When I think of our last podcast from a couple of weeks ago about accepting life on life's terms, I had to listen to it a couple of times and listen to myself and remind myself just about how to accept the things that are coming down, because we shared in that podcast that we got to accept it, but we can still be joyful and learn from it. So that's how my couple weeks have been. How about you?
You know what? It's funny that you mentioned that. I re-listened to that as well because I've had a couple weeks like that too, where life does not work out like you had planned it to work
Mm-hmm.
out. And
Mm-hmm.
that whole idea of letting go, I think it's such a good episode. So if you have not listened to that episode, go back and listen to it. It's really, really good. So I'm assuming, Shauna, you applied everything that we talked about and things turned around.
Not have turned around with the result that I wanted, but they certainly turned around for me. I was able to say, okay, what can I learn from this situation or this experience? And how can I apply it to my next one? And, some days you can just be a two and sit there and be like, I'm just going to doom scroll on my phone and I'm going to let myself feel like crap. And then you just pick yourself up, right? You still
Yeah.
have the emotions to go through, but I definitely can say, today I feel like $1,000,000.
I think that's the hardest thing for me is, like you said, it's okay to be a two. It's like for me, a lot of the times if I don't see the immediate change, I get very hard on myself. I double down on my thinking, right? And it is that being able to kind of hold in place because bigger things are happening that I might not know about, right? And always, if
Right.
I could stick in there, it's always worked out for me. And I know you have a similar experience.
Definitely.
Shauna, I want to talk about change here. We're doing an episode today on why interventions don't have to be an ambush. And, look, in pop culture, we have that show Intervention. We see
Mm-hmm.
things on TikTok, on Instagram, all the time on social about these really ambush interventions where people are crying and screaming and running out of the room. But really, interventions aren't like that, right? You are an interventionist. Most interventionists don't go like that, and they don't have to, right?
Well, that's exactly it. They don't have to. And really, when you look back at what it means to intervene, I looked up the definition, mediate, arbitrate, conciliate, negotiate, act as peacemaker, act as intermediary. That's what intervening is. You're intervening in someone's life to help them make a change. The addiction community have taken over the word as intervention. So anybody hears it and they're like, oh, I can't even call an interventionist. I don't want my family to have to go through that. And that's not it at all. Interventionists are there to help the families figure out what's next. They're you might not need a full intervention. You might just need some counseling or from family coaching or a link to somewhere or some treatment planning. Not every phone call to an interventionist. Like if someone called me, I wouldn't be like, okay, well, we're going to do a full on intervention in the invitational style. It's a 6-month contract, which is how we do it as a RISE interventionist, because change doesn't happen just in the, hey, let's meet everybody in a hotel room and give the person of concern their ultimatums and then it's over. That's not how an evidence-based practice works. But to intervene, to make a phone call and say, we're struggling with someone in the family, what would you suggest? Or perhaps they've said, I want to go to treatment. And so you don't really have to ask them to or invite them to, but you don't know where to start. They already know they need help. So
Mm.
making the phone call to intervene on behalf of someone I think people they're prohibited from doing it. No, that's the wrong word. They're
Well,
just
they're fearful.
reluctant. They're
They're fearful
fearful.
because, look, you see all this stuff on TV. And I think one of the things that I've learned from talking with interventionists like you and just, seeing this go down is that most of the time, interventions are not like that. Most of the time, the person knows they're being intervened on, and really intervention is about providing a solution and a path
Mhm.
forward, not about taking a bunch of things away. And I think that I think that that's the interpretation. And there's people that might be listening to this, Shauna, that are thinking about doing an intervention for somebody or involved in intervention, and everybody's I think perception of it is it's punitive.
Right.
Really, interventions aren't punitive, right? Can you explain that a
No.
little bit?
Well, the original model, so the Johnson model of intervention, it seems punitive because the family comes in, they tell them how much they love them, and then they say, we're worried about you and you have to go to treatment. And if you don't, we're going to withhold all that love from you, right? Or we're no longer in your life. And so that's the original model and the model that we see on TV. When you start looking at models like the Arise model or the Love First model, it's more about getting the whole family together, recognizing that it's a family systems disease and dealing with removing the shame and the guilt from it and saying, it's not your fault. There's generational trauma here, but along with it, there's resilience and hope. And so we work with our clients over a period of time, and it's an evidence-based model, Damon. 60% of people that go through the whole 6 months, 62% are sober at a year because it is invitational and it's escalating, right? So the first meeting is not about do this or go. That's a level 3 intervention on the Arise scale. And most people don't make it past level 2 because everybody's involved. We're trying to take the person who the family might call the addict, the sick one, the whatever, and making them say a part of the circle as opposed to the center, right? And taking a look at the strength and resilience of the family through generations and that we can get through this and we have to work together. So it's a very different model. It's much more invitational and it's very healing. The focus is on healing.
And I like that you're talking about the healing side of it. I think one of the things too that it was interesting to learn about interventions is also really it's almost more for the people who are doing the intervening. The recovery is also
Mhm.
for them as well. It's not
Oh,
just for it's not just for the person who has the addiction problem, because you were talking about this family unit. And can we dive into that a little bit? Because I think the more successful interventions that I have witnessed with people are the group, the family and the loved ones viewed it as if they were recovering,
mhm.
not just the
Right.
person who was going into treatment.
Well, and that's the whole point, Damon, is that just because one family member is sick doesn't say that the rest of the family is healthy. We have adapted to them, we have enabled them, we have put them, we have our own issues. That's why people do have family therapy or do things. We all have, especially if there has been some generational trauma. We're all, it's the body keeps the score is a book that talks about, how our bodies and our lives can reflect that, and we see patterns. So in our model, we go back a few generations to look at some of the challenges that they've had, but also how they've overcome them and the strength and the resilience that the family has. And someone in the family may be struggling with mental health, and we're able to sit there and say, okay, so we'll recommend that, maybe you start therapy as well. And so the whole family is healing because nothing changes, Damon, if you just send someone off to get treatment and they come back and there's been no healing or change in the family. Our model stays with the family and we meet with them weekly for 6 months. When the person has decided to go into treatment, we also have them. There's no secrecy. There are not secret meetings. There are no ambushes. It's open. It's to get rid of that shame and guilt that we carry so much on. So it's really important that the whole family heal.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I think one of the things I think that people probably experience a lot in interventions is that they realize that they're codependent, right? Like, and I know
Mhm.
that's a huge one. It's like a lot of
Yes.
times these interventions come up because people want to save people, right? and they realize these inappropriate boundaries. Of course, you want to save a loved one and you care and you don't want anything to happen to them, obviously, right? But it's these
Right.
boundaries issues. Can we talk about that a little bit? Because I think this is interesting for me because, I don't think, in the people that I have worked with, especially regarding peer support and coaching, just my
Mhm.
own experience as somebody that's in long-term recovery and knowing a lot of other people that are in long-term recovery, rarely do you have people who are alcoholics or have any kind of drug addiction that don't have some sort of dysfunctional family situation or codependency situation going on.
Right, because we create those maladaptive behaviors so that we can function. We enable so that we are able to do something, or we're codependent and people pleasing because we don't want the person who's struggling with the alcohol addiction or suffering from the alcohol use disorder or drug substance use disorder to explode. So we start to, overly care for them, making it easy for them because we're afraid of that explosion. And that happens. But, uh, I've listened to lots of different cases and casework and case studies. And, an example is someone, say the father comes and says, I'm worried about my son there or daughter, and they're, struggling with alcohol use disorder. So we start to have the family meetings. Then we start to look at, and people are starting to be honest about what they're struggling as well. And someone might say, well, I smoke a lot of pot. Right. And, oh, is that something, that, and so then they may want to change that. But then we run into trouble with sometimes, we had a weekly meeting, and the person of concern was actually drinking with the stepmom, because, and it's like, wait a second, I wonder why, but that shows, that there's sickness there. We've signed up. We're in this group, this family unit saying we want to heal. And then old behaviors come up or situational, we're away on a family vacation. So of course I'm going to drink. And, I was sitting up there and then they had a drink. I wasn't going to tell them to stop. So yes, there's a lot of codependency that comes from that. But and we've talked about this before, Damon, it's almost like everybody's struggling with codependency right now. We do a lot of people pleasing. We live in this Pinterest perfect world, and we just want everything to be perfect. And so we're adjusting everything. We're adjusting who we are, and not showing up as our authentic selves and saying, you know what, I need help too. I have certain people pleasing behaviors, and I don't know how to set a boundary to save my life. Clearly, I don't know how to set a boundary to save my life because I am floundering here. I don't know how to say no.
What do don't you think a lot of times, I mean, I see this a lot where people, and I think this is human nature, and I don't mean to say that anyone who has this thought is narcissistic in any way, because I think it's just human nature. If somebody has a flu around you, you're concerned for them. And then the thought will go, well, I wonder if I have the flu too. And I see that with alcoholism a lot, is that a lot of the times families want to do a hard intervention, make it all about them, make it you do this or not, because they don't really want to look at their own behavior. Because if their son, daughter, spouse, whatever is an alcoholic, what does that mean about them? What about their drinking, right? They don't want to question that there's anything wrong with them. And sometimes there's not anything wrong with them, but they're not a dysfunctional drinker, don't have alcoholism or anything. But do you see that a lot too? It's like families trying to deal with, and I think that's where the drama comes in. Like you see, it's like families trying to deal with their own crap. Like they come from three generations, Shauna, of alcoholism, and finally their son or daughter or something is now going into treatment. It kind of is one domino that hits their whole life,
Correct.
knocks over everything.
Right. And, when you have someone, a family member suffering from alcohol use disorder or drug substance use disorder, there's often a lot of trauma and chaos that comes. So people actually like the show Intervention because a lot of people thrive on chaos and drama. You see it out there. You see it in videos just generally, right? So you see a lot of people thriving on. We need to eliminate that. That's what our model does. Our model eliminates that. It is about the family healing. That is why everybody, comes together, recognizes we have a strong family recovery message. We work with everybody's healing. And, yes, it may surface that, I'm using pot to self-medicate. I don't even know if they call it pot anymore, Damon. I'm showing my age. I smoke pot or weed or whatever, a THC to self-medicate, or someone might be overusing their ADHD medicine, right? And so, yes, it can surface that, but that's why the whole engagement is centered around healing, strength, resiliency, getting rid of guilt and shame and blame, so that it's a place where people can say, I think I'm struggling, or not say, I think I'm struggling, but just have an opportunity to reflect, to self-reflect, and decide if they want to do something as well. So by taking that model, it really takes the shame, blame, and guilt. Getting rid of that is really, really key, because what you don't want is the resistance to go. You want it to be invitational and to invite them and say, okay, would you like to go? Because people that are just sent to treatment often drink within weeks of coming out, because they never wanted to go in the first place. They just wanted to get people off their back. By meeting weekly and having weekly goals as a family and focusing on family recovery and taking them out of the circle, reducing the chaos and drama that's going on, it allows them to make their own decision.
Yeah, and
evidence shows that if it is their own decision, they have a much greater chance statistically of staying sober for the long term.
Yeah, and I do believe that there are certain things, especially mental health issues with addiction, where you have to do wellness interventions where the person just might physically need a timeout because they can't stop, and there is, right? But you're right. Like, if they don't really decide, Shauna, that they want to go into treatment, and I think this is the point of this episode, guys. If you're listening to this and have somebody, and if they don't have the desire, at least an indication that they'd like to try that out, they'd like to pursue getting sober, there's really nothing that can be intervened with, really, right? I mean,
well,
at
no,
the end
I
of the
disagree.
day,
I'm going to disagree with you on that, because when you start to get into the invitational style, when you start to do the continuing care, as is in our thing, and we take that person out of the center, we make it easier for them to change their mind about that. They see other members of the family healing, and that's why it's a slowly escalating process, right? It's a chance for the whole family to heal. Well, when they feel like the spotlight's not on them and people aren't on their back, but collectively as a family doing things to heal, then they may start, because deep down, if we're suffering from substance use disorder, deep down, we do want to change and we do want help. But when our back is against the wall, you need to go to treatment, you need to change this, we'll dig in.
well, I'm saying, no, I totally get it. And I think that's the worst way to be able to do it. And,
right.
And I want to end this podcast also talking with the solution, because I think that that's important.
Sure.
But, I'm talking about people who just have, and I've heard this from people. It's like, I do not want to get sober. Not I can't, or I'm fearful to get sober. I'm not going to do it. I'm not ready for it right now. I don't want to. I don't really think I have a problem, right? Like a lot, there is a lot of that with drug addiction, and alcoholism.
Sure.
That is addiction, right? So when people are in the midst of that, thinking, family members thinking, well, I did an intervention and it's 100% going to work, and I'm never going to need to do another one. And just my presence there, and when they hear what I have to say, is going to change their mind about wanting to give up drugs and alcohol. That doesn't always work like that.
Never. No, I mean, it rarely works like that. But to your point about that, they don't want to at that time. They're in it. They don't see it as a problem. They're not enjoying it. Doing this style of intervention, Damon, if they don't come to the family meeting, they don't have to come to the family meeting. The family
Yeah.
continues to meet, not to talk about the person because we don't have secrets, but they continue to meet so that they can continue to heal and meet their weekly goals or objectives, or learn something new, or try different styles of communication. And so they're working on their own selves. And then the person of concern may be invited, well, is always welcome to come anytime, but they might see that everyone's off their case and the family is doing better and seems happier and are working on them. Maybe there's something to this, or I want to be part of that. I don't know. But yes, I mean, if someone is deep in it and saying, I really don't want to, and it's not time yet, and maybe it hasn't escalated and parents have intervened early on, which a lot are doing. I will say that because of the challenges with fentanyl being found in different things and people overdosing, parents are taking their children's drug use very, very seriously because the incidence of potentially dying is so high right now.
Yeah.
So you're seeing earlier intervention because of that. But it's really tough. It's really, really tough if someone is just, I'm not going to do it. But that's why the invitational style is with continuing care is so important, because over maybe not the first week or second week, but maybe 2 months in, the family's still meeting, they're doing their stuff. The person of concern might have hit another bottom and said, okay, well, I want a part of this too.
Well, it is a wave. I think like what you're talking about is if the whole family catches the wave and it's moving, even if the person who's been intervened in doesn't, when they all of a sudden see that everybody's on that wave, another wave will come and they might catch it, right? Like, so I do agree, like the family needs to move forward. I want to end this with solution here, because I think one of the biggest things that I've seen, and I've seen this in, in experiences that I've had with families and friends who have done these self-interventions, right? That the biggest problem, and I've gotten calls saying, hey, Bob or Sue or whatever, Betty, they're just not getting it, right? Like they're just not getting it. And like we did this big emotional thing. And when I asked them, I said, well, what solution did you provide them at the end of it? They go, well, what are you talking about? We just told them that they have to stop and this is what it's doing. And it was an ultimatum. And I'm like saying, you know what? Like many times, and I know this was my case, is like, I wanted to stop drinking, Shauna. And I know we've heard your story, the same thing with you, but like, I couldn't, right? Like, so the thing is that if you provide an intervention without a solution, it's really, I think, just harassment. It's not, it's really torture. I mean, right? Like, so you have to provide a solution. And if you want out, this is how we get you there, right? This is the next step we're going to take, right? Like, can we talk about the solution, how to present that solution well to people? Because I think so many times they just go right in and it's all about the front part of it. And there's no substance to the intervention.
Right. Oh, and it's so tough, Damon, when you're trying to do it on your own with a family member. The emotions run so high, the resentments are there. So you might start out with this plan. We're going to just tell them how we are. And within moments, it escalates and people are screaming and yelling. So it is really challenging to do an intervention on your own without someone who's emotionally not there, who's able to mediate, who's able to redirect the conversation. But what is the solution? Well, that's the thing. How do you know what's out there if you're not talking to a professional? I mean, I know for me, I'll do 15 or 30-minute consultation calls. And, that is just for free, because I just want people to, who don't know what to offer their family to be able to find out. You do a quick Google search of how to get someone to inpatient treatment. Well, there's a lot of ads that may pop up, call us, and treatment planners that might not be the right type. I always say go to the second or third page because there are companies there. But I don't think I don't think I can give you just a straight answer, Damon. I can't say, well, this is the solution. They need to go to treatment, because maybe they need to do intensive outpatient treatment somewhere locally and stay at home, or partial hospitalization, or maybe they just need to be stabilized and go to detox and then have a plan that's created. So
Yes.
there are so many options on how to, what to offer, also escalating stages and different levels of treatment depending on where the person is, because we've talked about the stages of change in a previous podcast. If they haven't moved forward enough in the stage of change, like where they are, like wanting to do something about it, nothing you offer them will work.
Mhm. Absolutely. But if you offer them nothing, nothing's going to happen. And I think
Right.
this is the big
Offer them
thing,
my number. I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
I'll
Well,
talk
that's
to anyone.
why,
I'll talk to a family member. I'll talk to someone suffering. Honestly, just call someone.
that's why I like this that's why I wanted to do this and talk with an interventionist, right? About specifically what interventionists do, because there is so much confusion about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I like this about, like, the interventionist helps package the solution and then shows
Mm-hmm.
you how to get them there in the most effective way, right?
Right.
And
Right.
having that before you do these interventions is a big thing. I mean, I do know that it does happen, and I've had friends who have gotten sober who have turned to their family and say, I have a problem and I need
Yeah.
help and I want to help find a solution. Rarely does it work like that. I've seen it's usually a
Right.
lot of train wrecks and car crashes before that.
Sure.
But I do think, having that, you know, that really is the role of your interventionist, is to help get that path forward and to be able to present that in a way that the person's going to understand the benefit of that.
Mm-hmm. 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 Definitely. And I do want to touch on something before we close. To intervene with someone who's sick with alcohol use disorder, we all know that, but someone may be suffering also from mental health and mental, what's the
Yeah.
opposite of mental wellness, impaired mentally and struggling with depression and can't figure out what the solution for that is. We work with that as well, Damon. We're resources for that. I mean, I just took a client. Well, I didn't take them. I arranged for them to go to an inpatient place that is mental health specific. So for anxiety, depression, cutting, and those types of because they were suffering so badly that they needed some inpatient treatment. So, we are familiar with all behavioral health solutions. We research, we visit places. I go on professional visits. We know what to recommend. So I don't, if people are suffering from mental illness, then we can help with that as well. And I just wanted to put that out there because it's not something we talk about a lot. We're always talking about alcohol use or substance use disorder.
Absolutely. And I think that is so important, is that I see this is one of the big flaws of peer support, and being a huge 12-step fan, and I know you are
Mm-hmm.
as well. One
Mm-hmm.
of the big
Yes.
missteps, I think, is that it's a cure-all for everything, right? Like one thing is
Right.
a cure-all for everything. And I found that not to be the case. And sometimes just, I've even recommended to people in 12-step groups who are having a hard time staying sober, that maybe look like they have something else going on, like bipolar disorder or something else. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's other
Mm-hmm.
things going on, that they need an assessment, that it's fine
Right.
to go out and get and this is the thing. Like, I've had people tell me, it's like, oh, I think I need to get assessed. And I'm like, yes, you do. Like, even if
Mm-hmm.
you don't agree with the assessment, it's good, because if you hear
Just
that
get one.
assessment 3 or 4 times, get one. So, one, medically, you're okay, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
there is a huge danger of coming off of drugs and alcohol, especially alcohol. Huge
Sure.
danger. We've had shows
Huge.
on this where people have
Mm-hmm.
almost died, all this kind of stuff. So I
Oh, yeah.
think
Detox is so important.
it's
Like
so important.
medically supervised detox. It's not even just so important, it's necessary.
Absolutely. This
But
has been
back to
a
what
great episode. I want to
I
just
just,
real quick.
oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
No, it was back to what you said about, once you take away the substance use and you're starting to heal in your brain and in your life and your behavior patterns, you really have a chance to take a look at, where is my mental illness or wellness and how necessary it is to address those, because they've been hidden by the alcohol use and the substance use. And so now there's a chance to heal. And no, the 12-step, the rooms don't heal everything. We still need to address some of that, not some of that, but once you take away the alcohol, other things that were hidden will surface, and we want to get well on every level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Final thoughts here, Shauna, for somebody who is maybe listening to this and they're just afraid. They've seen this whole ambush intervention thing and they're just afraid. A little ray of hope here. Do interventions work? And what's your final thought on this?
Interventions do work when done properly, when they're not the ambush style. And that would be the first question I would ask when calling an interventionist. How long do you work with the family? How do you do it? Do you have 2 secret meetings beforehand and then meet with the thing? Or are you meeting with the whole family? Tell me about your process. Is it evidence-based? What are the results from the model that you follow? And then work, and I will say Arise Interventions, the Arise Network, Family First. Those are 2 that I can say without a doubt are really phenomenal programs for interventions. You may not need an interventionist. You can, look up treatment planners. You can, there are lots of rays of hope. Heck, my number will be on here, or my email is Shauna@returntojoyrecovery.com. Shoot me an email. We can set up a call. And I can direct you to, if you're better served by a different style of intervention, or contact you, Damon. You know how to reach me. I don't want anyone to feel like they don't have someone to call, because it's just a conversation.
Absolutely. Information is power. We're going to put all of Shauna's contact information in the show notes, guys. If you're listening to this, getting value, definitely share, send this to a friend. Send this episode to somebody who maybe needs that education on it, is a little afraid of what's going on in their life, and could use all of this information. Shauna, McKenna, Vick, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Damon.
Keep the conversation going. Join Recovered Life, a community of like-minded people who are looking to live their best recovered lives. Membership is free, and you can apply at recoveredlife.us.